A very good morning to you. Welcome. Just going to fill in a bit of the story that we won't be looking at in detail, which is contained in 1 Samuel 1, chapters 1 to 15. If you get the chance to read this, it's well worth reading. It's very interesting to put in the background before David appears on the scene. But broadly speaking, at the end of the Judges period, Samuel appears and he becomes the last judge and the first great prophet. When he is, during his time, the people come to him and they want to be like the other nations. They want a king. They don't want to live the way that they've been living. They want a ruler like all the other nations around them. And Samuel warns them that this is not a good idea, but they are stubborn about it and they want it. So Saul, King Saul, is appointed. He's a Benjaminite, and he's a good king to begin with. And then he does two things that really displease God. The first one, he's getting ready to fight. This is in 1 Samuel 13. He's getting ready to fight against the Philistines, and he is waiting for Samuel to come and offer a sacrifice before they go into battle. And he waits for 7 days, so Samuel doesn't come. And then he offers a burnt offering, and which is not his place to do. And the moment he's done it, Samuel arrives. Isn't it just the way? And he says to him, "What have you done?" And he said, "Well, the people were scattering. They were all going off, and I had to keep them and muster them, and I had to offer the sacrifice. I couldn't wait any longer." And Samuel says, "God, he says in verse 13, chapter 13, verse 13, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom will not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart." And Samuel rose and went. It was because you have not done or kept what the Lord commanded you. And then 2 chapters later, in chapter 15, there's another incident when Saul is commanded by God to go against the Amalekites and to take their cities and destroy everything in them, including the animals, and not to take any of the spoil from that. It was all to be destroyed. Nothing was to be kept. They win the battle, but the people and Saul, with Saul's permission, keep the animals and the goods of the city, and the king is kept alive. And Samuel comes and says, what is the sound of this bleating? And Saul says to Samuel, "We kept the animals to offer as sacrifices to God." Well, that wasn't what God asked them to do. Now, whether we agree or not with the destruction of all these animals, that's a side issue. We shouldn't get sidetracked into trying to impose on the people of this time the thinking that we have today with regard to animals. But this was, at that point, the command of God was to destroy everything in the Amalekite city. And Samuel says these dreadful words, really. In chapter 15, verse 22, Samuel said, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you've rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." Now, those two verses had an enormous effect on my life when I was a young Christian, because I learned then the greatest lesson that we could ever learn, I think, and that is that God's valuation of things is very different to ours. the way God thinks about things is better, is different to the way we think. We think witchcraft and divination and tarot cards are dreadful and we should never have anything to do with them. And that's right. That's right. Absolutely right. We should have nothing to do with any occult practices. We shouldn't try and tell the future. We shouldn't do superstitious things like touching wood or walking round a ladder rather than under it. The only reason to do that is so that you don't get hit by anything falling underneath the ladder, not for superstition. We should be careful about superstition and all these things. As in the Good News by translation says, which does the Lord prefer, obedience or offerings and sacrifices? It is better to obey him than to sacrifice the best sheep to him. Rebellion against him is as bad as witchcraft, and arrogance is as sinful as idolatry. Because you rejected the Lord's command, he's rejected you as king. Rebellion. God has set order in this world, and rebellion is it brings great trouble on us. Rebellion. The generation we live in has been raised as I can do anything I like. I don't have to submit to anybody. I don't have to obey any rules. Why should I listen to any authority? Why should I listen to my parents? Why should I listen to my teachers? Why should I listen to the police? Why should I listen to the government? I'm doing my own thing. I'm free. Something to think about. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. There is far more blessing. There is more blessing in submission and in obedience. And in obedience to the letter. If the Lord tells you to do something, do it, and do it the way he told you to do it. Don't adjust what he told you to do to your circumstances, which is what Saul did. His circumstances were difficult. I don't know what I would have done if I'd had to wait 7 days for the person who was supposed to have come and offered sacrifices. I think waiting 7 days was enormous, an enormous achievement by Saul, but there was that point at which he simply couldn't wait any longer, and he rebelled. These are very important verses. Do look at them. If you get the chance to read chapters 1 to 15 of 1 Samuel, that would be wonderful, because it will fill in the gaps, the gap between Boaz and Ruth and the anointing of David as king, to show you what had happened in the nation as it settled down in the promised land. Very important. But those two verses, especially that phrase, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. It's the same. It's similar. That's hard, but it's true. Examine yourself. It's so important. And we're in an age of grace, I know, but the principles of the Old Testament still apply to us. They still apply in our world, that we should be submissive to one another. Great subject, isn't it? Something we should explore some more, perhaps. Anyway, it's good to speak to you. See you tomorrow, and may God bless you richly today. Bye-bye.